Hi, I'm Jon Dron, and I'm a professor in the School of Computing at Athabasca University, and where I teach fully online. And I'm going to tell you a bit about my beliefs about assessments and about the ways in which I put those beliefs into practice. I think I think my most deeply held and underlying belief that is that learners should have as much control over their own learning and consequently their own assessment as they want and need. My primary role as a teacher isn't to be a sage on the stage or a guide on the side, but I'm a provider of services that can help a student to learn. So bearing all that in mind, I've got a pretty standardized approach to assessment in all of my courses. There's variation, but they're all designed so that students can do things that matter to them, and things like projects and websites that are personally relevant. And if it's not one big thing, then every little thing is something that they can relate to their own experience and interests and goals and wishes and dreams. So every student gets to do something that no other student has ever done before and no other student will ever do again. And it's always personal to them as unique human beings. And to assess that, as much as possible, I really want to let go, but I want to stay close. I want to know how they're doing so that I can help them. I want to give them control, but control is, and to do things that matter to them. But control isn't just about providing choices. If you give people choices, but they don't know how to make those choices, it's actually probably worse than giving them no choice at all when they're learning. So it's about choosing when to choose and being able to delegate control to somebody else when they need to delegate control, and to take it back again when it's getting boring or difficult. It's about saying, "Hey, stop! I want to do this now." I keep trying to push for different ways of giving learners more control, and my latest revisions, the students can choose some of the learning outcomes themselves, and if they don't want to choose, they can simply allocate the marks to existing learning outcomes. Our reflection forms a central part of all of this, partly because it makes the learning visible, but it's also because it's how people learn. You can't learn without reflecting on learning. At least you can't learn well. The reflections are always shared. Well, if the students want to share them, and nearly all of them do. And there are always opportunities for comments. It's typically a blog or a wiki or something like that, which allows conversations to develop around what the students are producing. And this is very helpful for them to learn from others, to learn with others, to feel a sense of shared practice when actually they're doing different things from one another. And it's although they always make a considerable contribution to the summative grading at the end, I never grade them in directly. It's because they're part of the process and not the product, and the same's true of everything that they produce along the way. It's part of the learning process. It's not something which I should be judging with grades at the end. They can choose what they want to show me, and that's the essence of how it works. I don't give grades until the very end because I'm required to. I have to. Because they're very disempowering. They lead to instrumental behaviors. They don't serve any useful purpose. They just encourage mediocrity. But they do get a lot of feedback all the way through. And when the time comes to give that credential, I don't give grades for individual pieces of work, for assignments or tests or exams. In fact, exams are the scum of the earth, and I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot barge pole. But it's about giving me evidence. Students provide me with a whole bunch of evidence, not just of things that I've asked them to do, but proof that they've met the outcomes that they or I have determined. And the evidence can come from anything that they've done, always the reflections, of course. But help given to or sought from others, things shared with peers, emails, contributions to public help sites, chat records, log files from servers, or source control records, when they've been creating software and so on, as well as the stuff, the more conventional stuff like the software or essays or reports or whatever happens to be authentic to the task. The task of proving learning outcomes is itself a really useful learning activity. It helps them to go back over what they've learned and to think about how they've learned it and what's been valuable about it. And it gives them some agency in determining the resulting grades. So they give me a portfolio which has a whole bunch of work and other outputs, and they explain to me how it meets the intended outcomes. I usually give them a document to help them map those outcomes, but they're welcome to choose other methods. And some of them get really quite inventive with mind maps and websites with links and all sorts of great stuff. They can take, therefore, some very diverse paths to some very diverse destinations. There's usually related destinations. And it involves them much more in the process of assessing their competence than traditional assignments and tests. If they're not proud of something, they don't have to give it to me. If they think that something's not quite right, they have a chance to fix it before before they submit it as part of their portfolio. And it means they can give evidence from things like discussions, because I would never dream of assessing discussion contributions directly. Again, don't assess the learning process. But they can use it as evidence if they like, or if they're uncomfortable discussing, or they just arrived too late to the discussion to provide anything useful. They can reflect on what other people have done, or they can use some other evidence instead. Unless the purpose of the thing is to learn how to discuss, then why would you give marks to it? It's mostly pretty easy to mark because the students generally come up with reasonable enough grades, and I just agree with them. And if they don't, then that's usually a sign that the learning hasn't been totally successful. So that again makes it easy. I mean, the only really bad thing about it is that because the students feel passion about what they're doing, I sometimes wind up with more than 100 pages of evidence. I've just done one with 170 pages, which I think might be a record, I'm not sure, for a single term's work. No, but it's not as bad as that seems, because of course I've been following them as they go along, so I know much of what's gone into it already. It's not terribly frightening for me, and even when it's a slog, I mean, isn't it? I mean, how? Gosh, I bashed the microphone. I mean, how wonderful is it that when teaching is so successful that students have such passion? That's pretty much all that I want to say about this. I mean, for me, it's about essentially letting go, letting students do what they want to do, but staying close so that I can help them when they need help. Um, and that's what assessment is about as well. It's just part of that teaching and learning process. Hope you've enjoyed this. It's been way too long and I bumped the microphone way too often, and I really should have brushed my teeth before starting, but what the heck. These have been a few thoughts on assessment. Thank you.